Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Wrong Prince by Veronica Crowe. Narrated by Bretton. Chapter 1. Miss Cassandra Carlyle's Wedding, Cornwall, England, Fall 1807.
"I'll tell Papa you're being mean to me,"
8-year-old Cassandra Carlyle cried in the elegant drawing room of Rose Hill Manor. A stately cream-coloured structure originally built in the past century, it served as the country seat to generations of viscounts in the Carlyle family. The heir, Cassandra's older brother Elaine, exchanged worried glances with his best friends Richard and Jeremy. The three young men, all 15 years of age, grew up together in neighbouring estates.
"Papa!"
Cassandra wailed louder. Elaine peered out the window facing the side yard, adorned with a flower box full of roses on the sill, before hastily shutting the window pane. Cassandra knew he wanted to ensure the commotion would not reach the ears of their father, Viscount Rose, who was strolling about the garden, conversing with the Duke of Granston. "Whatever is the matter with you?" Elaine turned to her with a glower. "You've known we were leaving for Oxford today." Yes, Cassandra knew about their plans, and she felt excluded. And now that the big day had finally arrived, she was not quite ready to accept the reality of Richard leaving her just yet.
"You and Jeremy can go, but I want Richard to stay."
Cassandra pursed her trembling lips and crossed her arms defiantly on her chest.
"All three of us have to go to university,"
Elaine said in an exasperated tone.
"We can't stay here forever. That's just the way it's done." "But I want to marry Richard when I grow up,"
Cassandra exclaimed tearfully, her new large front teeth peeking halfway through her gums.
"If you go, I'll never see him again."
Elaine glanced sideways at his friends and rolled his eyes toward the ceiling.
"Don't be ridiculous. Richard will be back sooner than you think. You'll see." "Don't lie to me."
She pointed at the elaborate light fixture awkwardly tilted on one side.
"I'll tell Papa you broke Mamma's lamp and that you're hiding all those pamphlets with naughty drawings under your bed."
Elaine gaped at her.
"Who told you that?"
He narrowed his eyes and thrust a forefinger at his sister's nose. She clamped her mouth shut, but her eyes darted to the dark-haired young man standing next to him. Elaine muttered a curse and turned to glare at Jeremy, currently the Earl of Calverston and heir to the Marquessate of Waterford, the estate which bordered Rose Hill to the left. "What?" Jeremy raised his shoulders and blinked his dark eyes innocently at Elaine. Richard, the heir and future duke to neighbouring Granston Park, placed a soothing hand on Cassandra's shoulder. "Cassie, come now. Do not be so cross. I'll be back during the holidays, and who knows, I might even be able to visit you in a fortnight."
"I don't believe you."
Her eyebrows snapped together.
"You'll go there and meet some girl with a big round bum and large bubbies, and then you'll forget all about me."
Jeremy threw his head back and burst into a guffaw. "Good Lord, Cassandra!" Richard stared at her in shock. "Where in Hades did you learn to speak like that?"
"Jeremy taught me,"
she declared with a tilt of her chin.
"He said you like girls with big bottoms and fat melons."
She splayed her hands with the palm side facing a foot away from her chest to demonstrate the exact size. Richard swallowed and coloured into a beet red. "The hell he did!" Elaine pinned reproachful green eyes on Jeremy, who abruptly stopped laughing and feigned a saintly expression.
"I'll tell Papa you said a bad word."
Cassandra's face crumpled.
"Papa!"
she shouted. Elaine hastily pressed his hand over her mouth and held her tight. "Stop this, now!" he hissed in her ear. "If you do not, I will chain your hands and stuff your mouth with filthy rags, then lock you up in the attic. Do you understand me?" Cassandra nodded vigorously, looking utterly petrified, her curly red pigtails bouncing. Satisfied that he had frightened his sister enough, Elaine loosened his hold and released her. Cassandra instantly bolted, elbowing her way past him and Richard. "Damn it!" Elaine tried to grab her skirt but missed.
"Papa!"
she cried as she dashed across the room. "Come back here, you little—" Elaine hit his shin on a chair and uttered an oath, hopping on one foot as he rounded the furniture. Cassandra darted under a table, crawled and emerged on the other side. Elaine launched himself across the tabletop, ploughing through his mother's collection of small brass horses and various decorative trinkets.
"Papa! Help!"
Cassandra raced toward the door.
"Elaine is trying to kill me!"
Someone grabbed her at the waist and hauled her backward just as she reached for the doorknob. "Cassie!" Richard deposited her flailing and screaming onto a chair, securely holding her in place. "Control yourself. This behavior is not acceptable."
"But you're leaving me."
Fat tears slid down her pink, freckled cheeks.
"I'll never, ever see you again. I just know it."
"Don't be silly." Richard pulled a handkerchief from his coat pocket and wiped her sodden face. "I'm going to school, not to debtor's prison."
"Oh, Richard, but I'll miss you so, and I'm going to die if you leave me,"
she exclaimed between hiccups.
"What if you marry someone else?"
Richard kneeled in front of her on the Aubusson carpet and chuckled. "Don't be absurd, Cassie. I am 15 and you are only 8. I have a long way to go, and so do you. A few more years from now, you will have young lads mooning over you and falling at your feet. You'll remember this ludicrous infatuation and wonder what you were thinking."
"I don't want other lads. I want you."
Cassandra smacked her hand on the mahogany armrest and began to weep again, prompting an argument between the 3 young men on how to keep her quiet. A knock interrupted the hubbub, and Morton, the Rosehill butler, entered. "Lord Sunderland, your carriage is ready." He addressed Richard by his honorary title of Marquess of Sunderland in his usual formal manner, casting a sympathetic glance at Cassandra with a shake of his head before bowing and retreating out the door. "Well, we'd better get going." Jeremy checked his pocket watch. Richard made a move to stand up, but Cassandra flung herself at him, clinging with her arms about his neck and her legs around his waist. "Cassie, you fool, let go of him!" Elaine yelled, doing his best to untangle her, but she fought him at every turn. She lost one shoe in the fracas, and her left ponytail became undone. The collar of her yellow dress twisted backward. In desperation, Cassandra grasped Richard's neckcloth and clung with all her might. "Cassie, quit pulling on my cravat!" Richard made a choking sound and peeled her fingers off, but she latched onto his shoulders instead. Elaine pulled at her wrists. "Ow! Ow!" Richard bellowed, clutching Elaine's arms to keep him from tugging on Cassandra's hands. "Stop that, you oaf! You're pulling the skin off my body! Ow!" Cassandra kicked Elaine on his bruised shin. He howled and fell forward, knocking Richard, who was still on his knees, off balance. The 3 of them tumbled in a tangled heap of skirts and booted limbs on the carpet. "Good God, what a pickle!" Jeremy said with a hearty laugh. "Well, don't just stand there, you dolt!" Elaine yelled at him over Cassandra's screams. "Help me get her off him!" "Why didn't you say so in the first place?" Jeremy tapped Cassandra on the shoulder. "Cassie, Richard will marry you if you let go." She immediately stopped bawling and released Richard from her grip.
"Truly?"
She blinked at Jeremy and gazed hopefully at Richard. Elaine slapped his hand on his forehead and shook his head at Jeremy. "Now you've really done it, you half-witted buffoon." "I got her off him, didn't I?" Jeremy shrugged with a chuckle, merriment crinkling his dark eyes at the corners. Richard rose to his feet and combed his fingers through his messy locks. "I think I've had enough excitement for the day. Let us get out of here before I lose my sanity." He smoothed his coat, walked to the mirror over the console table by the door, and fixed his cravat.
But...
Cassandra's gaze flitted from one young man to the next. None of them were interested in proceeding with the wedding plans. She began to sob loudly. "Enough of this, Cassandra." Richard returned to her side and gently shook her by the shoulders. She stifled her sobs with a shudder, sniffling as she fixed large, doleful green eyes on the love of her life.
"You'll marry me, then?"
"Yes, by God!" Richard threw his hands in the air. "Anything to stop this madness."
"Oh, Richard, I'm so happy!"
Cassandra hugged him, then gaily skipped her way to the door.
"Wait here. I'll go ask Morty to fetch the vicar."
"What?" Richard's eyes widened. "You mean now?" "That won't be necessary." Jeremy towed Cassandra by the arm back to the middle of the drawing room and threw a telling glance at his friends. "I can be the vicar by proxy." Cassandra eyed him suspiciously.
"Is that legal?"
"Absolutely," Elaine interjected, shoving a lock of blonde hair off his forehead as he surreptitiously sent a meaningful nod at Jeremy. "I'll even be your best man and witness. Shall we begin the ceremony?" Richard glanced at the grandfather clock in the corner of the drawing room as it sounded the hour with a bong. He frantically motioned for Jeremy to hurry up with their scheme and proceed. Jeremy grabbed a book and a pair of spectacles that belonged to the Viscount from the nearby desk, finishing the ensemble with Elaine's fine cashmere scarf draped over his shoulders. He gestured with his hands for Cassandra and Richard to stand before him. "Dearly beloved," he began, looking up briefly from beneath the eyeglasses perched low on his nose. "Do you swear to truly serve our sovereign and do right to all manner of people after the laws and usages of this realm without fear or favour, affection or ill will, so help you God?" He peered back and forth at their bewildered faces and then raised his eyebrows. "What?"
"That's one of my books."
Cassandra frowned, pointing at the volume in his hand entitled Spy Monk. Elaine rolled his eyes heavenward and scrubbed his palm along the length of his face. "Reverend Jeremy, can we get on with this? Please?" Richard said through clenched teeth. "We're a little pressed for time here." He flicked another glance at the clock and gave Jeremy a speaking look. "Right." Jeremy threw Spy Monk over his shoulder and snatched the other book from the table. Elaine had been reading it earlier. It was entitled Sins of a Gentleman. He shuffled through the pages, nodded to himself with a grin when he found what he was looking for, and then cleared his throat to resume the ceremony. "Dearly beloved, by the power vested in me by the Constitution of Fornication and the Ladybirds of London, I now pronounce you husband and wife." "Huh?" Richard's eyebrows shot upward, with his mouth wide open.
"Reverend Jeremy?"
Cassandra raised a hand.
"I have a question."
All eyes fixed on her. "What is it, my child?" Jeremy leaned forward, asking in a preacher-like tone.
"What does fornication mean?"
"Bloody hell," Elaine mumbled under his breath. Jeremy grinned. "Ah, my favourite word." "Reverend Jeremy." Richard fairly snarled his name. "Can we just proceed? Please?" "Of course, let's see. Where was I?" Jeremy peered at the naked cherubs painted on the drawing-room ceiling and scratched his temple. "Ah, yes." He suddenly brightened and turned to Richard. "You may now kiss the bride," he proclaimed, closing the book in his hand with a snap. Richard's jaw dropped, looking thoroughly appalled. "Actually," Elaine intervened quickly, "since the bride is under the age of, consent, a handshake would be more appropriate." Cassandra stared at her hand.
"But I don't even have a ring yet."
Her mouth turned down at the corners, and her lower lip quivered. "Oh, right, we forgot about the rings." Elaine hurriedly looked about the room. "Ah, there, give me a minute." He strode toward the broken lamp. Elaine presented 2 brass rings from the lamp to Jeremy a moment later. "Reverend, can you rectify the ceremony so we can all move on with our lives in peace?" "Of course, my son." Jeremy made a great show of blessing the rings before continuing with the matrimony in all piousness. "Miss Cassandra Carlyle, do you take Richard Christopher Radcliffe, Marquess of Sunderland, to be your lawfully wedded husband, to love and to hold, but only if he deserved it, and to obey, though you truly don't have to, for ever and ever, but that's too long and I won't recommend it. Amen?
I do.
Cassandra beamed in complete adoration at Richard. Richard took the smaller ring from Elaine and tried it on her ring finger, but it was too wide, so he kept moving it on to the next one until it finally fit her thumb. Lord Sunderland, Jeremy went on, do you take Miss Cassandra Carlyle to be your lawfully wedded wife, to love and to hold, to indulge and to spoil, to obey everything she asks you to do with kindness and without a grudge, forever and ever, amen? Richard snorted and cocked a tawny eyebrow at him. Aren't you just a little bit partial? Just answer the question, my son, Jeremy replied solemnly. I do, Richard uttered in a sharp tone. You don't seem convinced, my son, Jeremy said in a serious tone, worthy of a vicar, and frowned at him. Do you need a moment of contemplation? Richard pursed his lips and sliced his forefinger across his neck, narrowing his eyes at Jeremy. Elaine coughed loudly and shuffled his feet as he tapped a forefinger on his fob watch with a pointed glare at Jeremy. I suppose I can exorcise you another time. Jeremy spit on his index finger and drew a wet cross on Richard's forehead. Richard swore and furiously erased it with his sleeve. Ah, you are possessed, my son. Let me pray for you. Jeremy dipped his hand in someone's leftover tea on the table and whisked the cold liquid across Richard's face as he muttered a blessing, ignoring Richard's angry retort, which included the word bloody, the name Jack, and the other term for a donkey. Ahem. Elaine sidled closer and elbowed Jeremy sharply in the ribs. Assaulting the Reverend is a mortal sin, my son. Jeremy grimaced, massaging his side. But it can be forgiven with a petition and a generous donation. He extended his hand, palm up, toward Elaine and waggled his eyebrows as he rubbed his thumb against his fingertips. Elaine reached into his pocket and begrudgingly slapped a half-crown onto Jeremy's hand. Bless you, my son. Jeremy stared at the coin and bestowed him with a condescending smirk. But I fear your half-crown will only pardon half your sins. What if I just slice the Reverend's bollocks into halves? Elaine growled. Pray will that absolve my transgressions? I will pray for your blackened soul, my son. Jeremy quickly pocketed the coin and focused his attention back on the nuptials. Please proceed, my child. He gestured at Cassandra. Cassandra took the brass ring from Elaine and slid it on Richard's ring finger. It fit perfectly. I now pronounce you husband and wife. Jeremy replaced the Viscount's eyeglasses on the table and deliberately threw the book over his head to land on Elaine's face, and then swooped down and kissed Cassandra on the cheek.
Richard is supposed to be the one to kiss me.
Cassandra writhed and giggled as Jeremy proceeded to tickle her. Forget this clumsy oaf. Jeremy grinned crookedly. He's not even half as handsome as I. He craned his neck and straightened his collar, then gave her a wink. Cassandra stuck her tongue out and made a face at him. Quit dawdling. Richard glanced at Jeremy before sending another concerned look at the clock, which began to chime the quarter hour. We are terribly delayed and must leave at once. Cassandra's mirth faded.
You promised not to forget about me.
She clutched the tail of Richard's coat, her eyes filling with tears. Richard smiled and ruffled her hair. I promise, he said with a chuckle, pinching her cheeks and giving her face a playful shake. Be good, all right? Cassandra tried her very best not to cry and nodded. Then Richard was out the door, with Jeremy and Elaine running down the cobblestone path, bordered with a profusion of colourful blooms swaying in the breeze, to the waiting ducal carriage. Chapter 2. 10 years later. Cassandra walked along the deserted beach with her stallion Apollo absorbing the peace of her surroundings. She pulled on her horse's reins and coaxed him to venture with her to the very edge of the sea, where the water tickled his hooves, making him snicker. She breathed in the salt-tinged air and smiled at the colours that blazed across the horizon. Ah, how she loved early mornings like this when all was quiet, save for the birds and the sea. No one ever understood her penchant for such an ungodly hour, except for the one person who used to share it with her. She heaved a deep sigh. Is he looking up at the same sunrise? Does he think of her sometimes? Apollo nudged her cheek. I know, she patted his nose. I shouldn't be moping, but I do miss him. Her faithful mount bobbed his head before snorting in a manner that resembled disapproval. You know me too well, she laughed, and I know you well also, you colossal glutton. You don't care at all for my feelings and want to return home to your breakfast. Apollo's ears perked up at the mention of food, and he started tugging on the reins she held. All right. Cassandra shook her head at his antics and mounted the eager stallion. They took off in a swift gallop toward home. Good morning, Morty, she said as she passed the butler on her way to the breakfast room. The butler's expression did not change on hearing this appellation, though a bushy eyebrow quivered. Good morning, miss, he replied, his tone as stiff as the points of his collar. And the name is Morton, the same one I have been using in my 30 years of service to the Viscount. I know, Morty, she chuckled over her shoulder as she opened the door to the breakfast room. Poor Morty, she should quit riling him up every morning. Mamma! Papa, I'm home. Have you finished eating, or can I join you? She said before coming to an abrupt halt upon realizing they had a visitor. Her parents looked up from their repast with broad smiles, but her attention focused on the third person occupying a chair facing away from her. Cassandra gasped at the sight of the man's wavy hair curling a few inches past his shirt collar. Elaine? She said with a slight tremble in her voice. Her brother swiveled in his seat. Surprise! Elaine! Cassandra rushed to him and hugged him tightly. I missed you so much. She framed his face in her hands, laughing as she squeezed him again. He looked taller and broader, and his hair was longer. His face was leaner, made even more handsome with deep dimples on his cheeks and stunning eyes identical to hers. Good God, look at you! Elaine stood, lifted her up and swung her around like he used to do when they were children. You're all grown up. I can't lift you any higher. Your legs are too long. He pretended to fumble in mid-twirl, evoking the expected squeal. Of course I am taller, Cassandra chided as he set her down on her feet. It's been 3 years since you last came home. What did you expect? She smacked his arm for good measure. I'm glad you decided to come back home, son. Viscount Carlyle leaned back in his chair. I have no inkling of how you can find European society so interesting. I was not interested in social life in Europe, Father. The history and culture of the places we toured were what fascinated me. I did right that Richard and I... The Viscountess interrupted him with a loud cough, at the same time bestowing him with a speaking look. What is it? Cassandra raised her eyebrows. Why don't you sit down and have some breakfast, my dear? Her mother said, a large diamond ring winking from her finger as she waved her hand toward a chair. A trim lady of mature years, she still retained the glorious Titian tresses and clear complexion that had made her exceedingly popular with the gentlemen of the ton a couple of decades earlier. She was impeccably dressed in royal blue taffeta with not a wrinkle, a sharp contrast to Cassandra's salt-water-stained shirt and riding breeches. As if reading her thoughts, a glint of distaste came into Lady Carlisle's eyes as she took in Cassandra's soggy attire and mud-encrusted boots. After breakfast, I want you to go to your room and get rid of those ghastly breeches and that ridiculous man-shirt you're wearing. And, oh Lord, you must have your maid do something with that hair. You will be the social death of me. I don't know how your father can tolerate seeing you like this. She looks fine to me. The Viscount shrugged and took a sip of his coffee. Cassandra grinned at her father as she slid back into the chair, facing Elaine. She looks like a stable boy. Her mother straightened, planting her delicate hands on her waist. And what were you thinking, giving her that monster of a horse? Well, it didn't look like much when I purchased it from Tattersall's 12 years ago. How would I know it would grow to mammoth proportions? Viscount Carlyle winked at Cassandra. Besides, what my little girl wants, my little girl gets. She's 18, in case you haven't noticed. Her mother glowered, her voice rising. And she's overdue for her first season in London. The Viscount folded his hands over his belly and yawned, then rolled his eyes toward the ceiling. Did you see that, Elaine? The Viscountess pointed at her husband's bland expression. This is the reason why your sister refuses to go. She should be dancing at Almack's looking for a husband, but instead she's galloping all over the countryside on that beast with that profligate friend of yours, Lord Waterford, and getting into all sorts of tomfoolery. She's turned into a hoyden, and it's all your father's fault. Elaine cleared his throat. Mother, I think we all know why she's not interested in having her season in London. The Viscountess harumphed and glared at him, but became mercifully silent, pushing the food around her plate with a frown. Cassandra puckered her eyebrows. Her mother and brother seemed to be hiding something from her. Well, it was time to see what they were up to. She stood and placed her fists on her hips. All right. What are you not telling me? Elaine took a long sip of coffee and carefully set his cup back on the saucer before he addressed her in a serious tone. We're invited to luncheon tomorrow at Granston Park. We are back for good, Cassie. What? We? Cassandra's heart began to pound. You mean you and Richard? I'm sure you know that the Duke of Granston's illness has turned for the worst, and he's not doing very well. Richard is his only son and heir, and there are matters that must be settled and announced tomorrow. Richard is here? Cassandra whispered, barely paying attention to what her brother was saying. Yes, but Richard is here? Oh, I can't wait until tomorrow. Cassie, her brother touched her arm. It might be best if you just stayed at home tomorrow, my dear. Her mother rose from her seat and went to her with a troubled expression on her face. Don't you worry in the least, dear brother and mother. I wouldn't show up looking like this and embarrass you. She glanced confidingly at her father. Right, Papa? Whatever you say, Pumpkin, he grinned back at her. George Carlyle, her mother yelled in a surprisingly booming voice, looking like she had finally reached the end of her tether. Did you hear what your father said, Elaine? This is what I have to contend with. Is it any wonder that the girl is callow and spoiled beyond belief? Elaine propped an elbow on the table and rubbed his forehead warily with his hand. I think I'm going back to Europe, he lamented. I think I'm going back to my room. Cassandra strolled toward the door, humming a merry tune as she went. She had pined for Richard for years, and now the waiting was finally over. There were so many things she wanted to talk to him about, like university, his travels to Europe, America, and India. They could ride again in the mornings, and she could sit on the beach while Richard painted the sunrise. Then in the evenings, they could play whist with Elaine and Jeremy and beat them soundly. Cassandra wondered if Jeremy knew Elaine and Richard had returned. He had missed going to Europe with them because he was in mourning. His father had unexpectedly passed away 3 years ago, and he had taken over the title of Marquess of Waterford. Jeremy had been her only partner in mischief for the past few years, and sometimes she wondered if that had left him a tad lonely. But now his old friends were back, and they would all be together again. Cassandra ran up the staircase and burst into her bedchamber. She threw the armoire doors wide open and sifted through her clothes to select something appropriate for the luncheon. Several of the day dresses her mother had purchased for her had not been worn even once. She hated the frilly lace and fancy silks. Brocades made her skin crawl. She pulled out the pretty green silk with the least embellishments on the sleeves and shoulders. It had cream ribbon ties that would emphasize her waist and scalloped edges at the bottom that would bring the eye to her matching satin slippers. She sighed. For Richard's sake, she would wear it tomorrow and try her best not to scratch herself, no matter how badly the fabric made her itch. She hugged the dress to herself and stared at her reflection in the mirror. A slender young woman with large, vivid green eyes and tousled red gold hair looked back at her.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?